Hi everyone, and on behalf of Manitoba Agriculture and Resource Development, I would like to welcome everyone. My name is Leanne Tibbetts and I'll chair today's seminar. We are pleased we have representatives from a variety of agriculture organizations and community groups from across Manitoba registered. This validates the importance and timeliness of this conversation. Leadership skills are critical. Our goal today is to help you advance your leadership skills and identify strategies you can apply within your nonprofit space. We hope this information will help your organization thrive. I would like to introduce and welcome Patrick O'Reilly from Padraig Coaching and Consulting. Patrick was a Crown Corporation CEO, and he is now a certified executive coach. He specializes in helping those who lead others to excel in their role. Patrick has spoken to diverse audiences, ranging from small groups of executives to large conferences, with hardworking frontline service people to heads of government and royalty. Patrick's career has seen him presenting across Canada and around the world, from Iceland to Australia, Guyana to China, with stops along the way at the 2010 Olympic Winter Games. I'm confident his presentation will stimulate questions. Please use the chat or the question feature on the right-hand panel, and he will respond to questions following the presentation. We are so pleased that you're with us today, Patrick, to discuss leadership development approaches and share your insights in the steps to make good leaders great. So I'm going to let you take it away, Patrick.
Thanks, Lan. Appreciate that. Happy to be here. Very happy to be here. And so thanks for the invitation, and thanks to everyone who's joining us. I appreciate you showing up today and making time for this. Maybe before we dive in, what would be interesting for me, and make sure we're all comfortable with the chat function, if you can find chat on the webinar tool here, and just write what town or city you're in right now, and if you're comfortable, what organization you're with. Everyone wants to just jot that in the chat. That gives me a sense of who I'm talking to and gives you some practice using the chat. Oh, there we are. Nope, that's Leanne. Lori, do participants have the chat set up?
I believe so, and if they're having challenges with the chat, they certainly can go into the questions tab and type it in there as well.
Okay, thank you.
So lots of responses coming into the questions tab. Everyone from, or distances from Haniota to Winnipeg, Hartney, Brandon, Rivers.
Okay. Nice. So a little bit all over. Leanne, I can't see the questions coming in on the questions tab.
Okay, so right above your chat function, there's a little questions tab as well, so you can click on that if you want, or I can just help you out by sharing some of the thoughts if you wish.
Yeah, I have the tab. I just don't see any of them coming in, any of the commentary coming in. So that would be great if people use that questions tab. Feel free to interrupt me with whatever you see there. That would be helpful.
Perfect. We've got lots from Portage, La Prairie, Cypress, Rivers, Mountain Road. So lots of diversity. So it's great.
Nice. Well, welcome everyone. I'm glad you're here. I'm happy to be here with you. So if you've got a chance, please grab a pen and paper because we're going to interact a lot on this, engage. And if not, we're going to be sending you a little bit of material afterwards, so don't worry. I'm not going to use a PowerPoint today. I'm going to talk with you, and I hope it can be as interactive as possible. I mentioned to our organizers that if you have questions, of course, we're going to have a Q&A at the end, so I look forward to that. But if you got questions in the meantime, you can throw them in the question box or in the chat box, and Leanne will be sure to let me know what you've got. She'll get my attention because I'm going to be paying attention to you guys through the camera. So first of all, when I start any sort of conversation like this, any sort of webinar, you know, nowadays, I think we've all got a lot of fatigue. We've been online an awful lot. There's a lot of webinars going on. So I like to be intentional about how we start. And the first thing I'd like you to do is think about how focused do you wish to be? And I've got some very old school cards here, how focused, 1 to 7. And what I'd like you to do is chat in the chat box if you can, or in the Q&A box if you like. Think about how focused do you want to be for today's seminar, where 7 is, you know, almost Zen-like, focused entirely. The whole world is shut out around you and you're with us. 1 is, you know, the kids are fighting in the living room. There's a fire in the kitchen. You've got this on just to have some adult voice in the background. And what I want to emphasize is I'm okay wherever you are. I don't mind. I don't mind what number you are, but I want you to be intentional for yourself about how focused do you want to be. So if you want to jot down, if you can find the chat, that would be great because I can see that, I think, or the Q&A box. 1 to 7, how focused do you want to be for this? And so I'm still only seeing Leanne and Leanne on the chat. So if Leanne, you could
Patrick,
just...
I can change that if you like. If it just, you know, I can switch that up. If you just give me 1 second, everyone. There might be just a slight delay. Just hold on for a second.
Thanks, Laurie.
You're welcome.
I see that somebody has said they can't enter in the chat.
Oh,
Okay, Patrick, can you see that now? Can you check it now?
I can see the Q&As. Yes, I can.
Okay.
Yeah.
If they're having challenges with the chat, they can use the questions tab.
So just shoot you a question about I can't. I see Sabrina has said she can't enter in chat, but she can see chat. So, okay, well, I'm going to keep going, and I can now see the Q&A at least. So, wow, lots of high numbers, lots of high numbers. Okay, excellent. So, you know, the next question I'd have for you then is no matter where your number is, and I'm seeing a bunch of high numbers. Hopefully everyone's feeling comfortable to say, you know what, I've only got a 3 in me today, and that's okay too. My next question for you is, no matter where your number is, what's one thing you could do that would help you achieve that number, whatever that number is? So maybe that, you know, in my case, I find I'm distracted by email when I'm on a webinar. I'm always kind of flipping over to email, checking that, and then coming back. So in my case, it would be closing my browser window. Maybe it means turning off your phone or putting it in another room. Maybe it means giving the kids a coloring book or something to work with. What's one thing that you can do that is going to help you achieve that level of engagement and focus that you want to achieve? You just want to take a minute and do that for yourself. Okay, in whichever box you can use, the Q&A is fine. One more question for you. What would you like to get from today? What are you hoping? Why are you here? If you could give me a sense of that, I can try my best to make sure we achieve those things for you. I see I'm a little behind here. I've got my coffee. I've got to find a comfortable space. Excellent. To better manage and lead our summer stuff. Okay, thanks, Heather. Any others? Managing staff, thanks, Laura. Be re-energized. Okay, I'm going to help with that. And a lot of unexpected deadlines. Oh, deadlines that came up. Okay, great. All right. Well, we're going to try to address those all. We've got a few different topics we're going to cover today. So I don't know if I said this out loud, but I mentioned to Leanne, if you have a question, by all means, jot it in the Q&A and Leanne will ask me. And feel free to save up the bigger questions till the end because we're going to have a good discussion round at the end. So one of the topics we said we were going to talk about today is finding your why, figuring out what motivates you and drives you. This is for, you know, we hear from a lot of people I feel like something needs to shift in my career or in my role, and I'm not exactly sure what that is. Some folks will say to us in our coaching sessions, we do a lot of one-on-one and group coaching with people, and we hear from them that, others seem to know where they want to go and how to get there. And some days I don't feel like I even know where I want to be, let alone how I'm going to get there. Sometimes folks wonder if they're in the right job for the long term. Is this right for me? And, those are all really big questions. And at the same time, they're really key to your success. They're key to your happiness, and they're key to your doing your job well and succeeding in your role. So even though that's a huge topic, a big life-changing question, I think it's one that's absolutely essential. So we're going to talk a little bit about it, and we will give you a bit of information afterwards that you can use to work on at home. But the first step to all of that is figuring out your why. When you understand, why you do things, what motivates you, it's much easier to plan and create a plan that fits, really. So that starts with figuring out why you do what you do and why you want to do it. Many of you have probably heard of an author named Simon Sinek. He did a TEDx talk that is hugely popular and has written books about it since. And I like his idea that he says, all of us know what we do. Some of us know how we do it. We can articulate how we do it. But those who know why they do what they do end up being most closely aligned with their purpose in life. They achieve the values they're living to. And of course, with that alignment, they're better able to be motivated. They're better able to inspire others as leaders. So one of my favorite quotes from Simon is, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. I've got a little one of my cards here, so you can see, going very old school with my cards. But so that's, I think it's important to remember that quote, regardless of whether you're selling something through a business, because frankly, we're all selling things. We might not be selling goods or services, but we're selling our ideas, we're selling our goals to others, we're selling plans that we have, whether that's to our boss, to our board, to our stakeholders, to our clients, to our staff. We're trying to sell our ideas and our vision and our direction. So I'm frequently reminded of that quote, because knowing why you do what you do and figuring out if it aligns with what you want to be doing is really, frankly, essential and leads to great success. I want to tell you a story about one of the clients I've worked with. He happens to be now a senior executive with one of the world's largest life insurance companies. He first became my coaching client when he was an associate in the Dallas office of this insurance company. He had a few agents working for him, and he was a life insurance salesman, basically. And he contacted me and said, within 2 years, he was quite young, he was in his early 30s. He said, within 2 years, I want to be a managing partner of one of our offices somewhere in the US. That's a huge step, right? That's a huge step that puts you into the executive cadre, one of the biggest life insurance companies in the world. They have, maybe 60 offices throughout the US. So it would put you in that top level. And as I say, he was an associate in the Dallas office. So a lofty goal. And so I started helping him figure out how he was going to get there. And he was making progress and then making a step back and then making a bit of progress and making a step back. But it was only when I started prompting him to think about why he wants to be managing director of an insurance office. Why does he want to be selling insurance? Because, frankly, let's say it, between a lot of us, insurance salesman sort of feels a bit like, used car salesman. It feels like it could be sketchy. It feels like it's maybe not something you want to, people devote their lives to. But he really was devoted to finding his way through this company. So we started talking about his why. We started exploring what is it that's driving him? What is it that helps him find his purpose? And he'd never really thought about it before, but in fact, when he started to think about it, he realized that his father had died when he was 18 or 19 years old. He was a freshman in college in the US. And, you know, it was absolutely devastating. It kind of ruined his year in school. It was devastating to his mother, his siblings, his family. But what he realized also was that it wasn't financially devastating to his family because his father happened to have good life insurance. And because of that, that was the only reason Steve was able to actually complete college, to finish college and do what he wants to do. And as we explored this idea, he realized that's what's driving me. That's that realization that my dad doing that saved our family, even at the worst time in the world for them. And so he realized deep down that's what he was trying to do. He was trying to help other people protect their families. He was trying to help other people make sure their kids could go to college. So astonishingly profound why, but he'd never even thought about it. He just knew he was in this business and liked it, and it was feeding him, but he hadn't articulated why it was feeding him and what was driving him. And after that is when he really started to accelerate, because each step that he took towards his own career goals were driven by his knowledge that he was also doing this because he wanted to help. He wanted to serve people. He wanted to make sure that some kid out there could go to college who maybe wouldn't have when one of their parents died. And you know, his goal was 2 years to become a managing partner of one of their offices. And 17 months after we started working together at probably one of the youngest managing partners the company's ever seen, he took over the office for Iowa. And within 2.5 years of being in that role, the company has now promoted him. He's back in Dallas as corporate vice president of this massive life insurance company. And that's all because he realized this is something that motivates him, that drives him to his core. And he uses that now in his daily work on those days where he's frustrated, on those days where he thinks, why am I here? Why am I doing this? Why am I putting up with this person or that person? He reminds himself why he's doing it. And I firmly believe that the people around him, sorry, I probably hit my mic there, realize that people around him see it in him. You know, he doesn't go around telling people this is his why, but people realize that that's what's driving him. And so, you know, one of the things I think, and exercise, we won't do it right now on the webinar, but we'll send you a sheet afterwards. But one of the things I want you to think about is, what sort of things do I love? Whether it's stuff you're doing at work or stuff you're doing in your home life, why I love it, and what sparked that love. And that's a contemplative exercise. That's not something we're going to rush to do in the middle of a 90-minute webinar, but those are the questions I want you to think about, and we'll send you later to help you figure out what is it that drives you. And it may not seem directly related to what you do as a career, but it may help you figure out if there are other aspects. So one, it might be a change in role, but it might also be, the question would be, how do I find more of this in the role that I'm in now? So it's not so much, you know, do I have to change my whole life because I realize there's something that motivates me and I'm not there? Well, if you're a long ways away from it, maybe it does, but it also might mean, how can you bring that into the role that you're in right now? How can you help love your role, love the opportunities you have a bit more by figuring out what it is that inspires you, what drives you, what motivates you, what things do you love about life that you'd like more of? So give a little bit of thought to that, and by all means, in the Q&A or the chat, if you're willing to share, if there's something that right away jumped out to you, that drives you, that motivates you, that you'd like to see more of in your life, jot it down. I'd love to see what's there. And then I'll just give it a minute and see if anyone's got anything to share. Okay, why do I put up with someone? Okay, so that's a good question. And thinking about that, you know, let's explore that one for a second. Why do I put up with someone? I would suggest be thinking about the context, be thinking about the situation, and figure out, are there deeper things going on that keep you in that relationship or in that role? Or are there things that you could address in that relationship or role that would bring you back to that place you want to be, right? Are there conversations that need to be had that can help bring you back to the why, the where you are? Sabrina has said, I really enjoy helping people on a deeper level if possible. Excellent, excellent. So taking that and figuring out why is it that you love helping people so much on a deeper level? What does that bring you? What do you feel in your heart when you do that? To help get you to that mindset of, right, that's what I'm aiming for and that's why. And then, so how can I start to build that in to what I do in my day-to-day life? Are there aspects of my role that are feeding that I can sort of dive deeper? Are there other aspects of my role that I can adjust or change so that I feel like I'm making a difference, that I'm helping people on a deeper level? Again, these are thoughts that will take more than a few moments on a webinar. But to me, those are the important conversations we have with ourselves, and I encourage you to think about that. Tied in then, to take it maybe to the next step, the why do we do what we do and what motivates us? Why do we enjoy being leaders, for example? Why do we enjoy climbing the corporate ladder? Why do we enjoy interacting with people in our communities at work, through employees, through stakeholders, through clients, through the board, that sort of thing? Ties into how we then show up as a great leader, in our organization or with our clients. And, you know, we do a lot of work in my company with individual leaders, and as I say, with groups or with teams and organizations, to make good leaders great, to make people who are in a leadership role of some sort and are pretty good at it or are doing their best at it, at least, to then be great at it. And to be great at it means understanding your why, what motivates you, why do you want to be a great leader? And, you know, and the difference between good and great is often one of inner motivation. It's one of figuring out what you want out of this that helps make you great. So I guess my next question would be, if you think about a leader you've had in your life, someone at work maybe who was your boss at the time, or a leader in a volunteer organization, a church group, whatever you think of right away when I say think of a great leader you've worked with. And then hopefully you can take a moment in the Q&A. I'd really like people to engage around what characteristics stand out for you about what made that person such a great leader. Okay, thinking about someone who was a great leader in your life. What was it you admired about them? What were the characteristics that made them great? Can you jot some of those down for me? Just help me know. Confidence, excellent, willing to mentor others, compassionate, understanding, patient, excellent answers. Excellent, good listener, good communicator, thanks Tony. Enthusiastic and organized, okay, excellent, excellent. So a real range, right, from that sort of confident, compassionate, understanding, patient, which might be the quieter leader, to the enthusiastic, the organized. We see good mentor a couple times. Good communication comes up a lot. Leading with empathy, they understand those around you. Firm and caring, which is, thanks Shelley. Those are two great ones that are often a struggle for people to have both those characteristics, right? A leader might tend to be more caring. Another leader might tend to be firm. To get those two together is sort of a really winning combination, right? So this week I'm going to dive into some of the core skills for leadership. You'll probably know that we're doing another one of these webinars next week, and next week we'll talk a little bit about how you adapt some of those core things you have, those core skills, those core motivators, your why, to the people you're leading. So when we see, willingness to mentor others, compassionate, understanding, and yet firm, caring, and decisive, that's a wide range. And so how do you bring out some of those, and how do you figure out which people you're leading want you to be decisive and firm versus which people want you to be compassionate and patient? Those show up different ways. So we'll dive in to figuring out what folks need from you on a specific level next week. But this week, what we're going to start with is the general characteristics, the general skills that a good leader masters to start becoming a great leader. Okay, so the first one we like to talk about is this one, delegating. A great leader knows how to delegate. And, this is one of the things in our chats, whether we're running our leadership workshops, or we're doing one-on-one coaching with leaders, it comes up so frequently that one of the differentiators between being a doer, being a worker, and being a leader is that not just ability to delegate, but understanding and comfort level of being able to delegate, right? Because when you're a frontline worker, you probably never have the opportunity to delegate something to someone else. And then all of a sudden, when you're a leader, you actually have to delegate to people, or you won't be able to do the work you need to do. You won't be able to do the higher level thinking, spending time picturing future goals, figuring out how we're going to get there, if you're spending time doing the work that needs to be delegated. And so that one often is the number one thing that is so hard for people who are taking on new leadership roles, and who often say to us, no one ever taught me how to do this, right? I was a really good widget maker, and now all of a sudden I'm managing all the people who are making the widgets, and I'm not making widgets anymore, I'm managing people. And that's the challenge, right? That's the gap that so many organizations aren't great at helping people step over or bridge that gap. And it doesn't have to be widget making, it could be policy writing, it could be anything. So the other challenge we see with that, and you might reflect on this, is that leaders are typically, especially new leaders, are so typically keen to do a great job, right, that they hesitate to put their performance success in the hands of other people. And of course, that's what it feels like you're doing when you delegate, right? You're relying on others to do what needs to be done. And whether you look good as a leader and whether you succeed as far as your boss is concerned is going to depend on how those people do. And so it's terrifying for a lot of people to do that. But it's counterintuitive, because great leadership is truly managed, it is truly evaluated, I guess, by figuring out how well you manage others to achieve things, how well you engage others to achieve things. And that's all about delegating. That's about trusting people. And that's a big part of it, is learning to develop trust by starting small with the delegating and moving up. But a big warning sign in our experience for leaders is if you have that feeling of, it'd just be easier and faster if I did it myself. And who hasn't had that feeling, right? Any of us who have ever led teams of people, I guarantee we've had that feeling probably more often than we like to think about, where it just seemed easier and faster to do it ourselves. That's a short-term solution that causes long-term pain, right? It sets up leaders to maybe remain as good leaders if they're lucky, but not to be great leaders. And so every time I find myself thinking that, I use that as a trigger. I catch myself. I'm like, uh-oh, that's an indication that this should be delegated to someone, and there's something blocking me from that. So what is it? Am I having trouble trusting them? Is it a matter of I'm too rushed? I don't want to take the time to let someone else learn this. And I remind myself of the long-term costs that come of that, and it helps. So understanding the importance of delegation to your own performance, to your team morale, right, is essential. The team, I'm sure many of you have been on a team where you've worked for a micromanager, right? We hear that so often from frontline staff. Oh, my manager just micromanages everything, doesn't give me any flexibility, doesn't give me any room to learn, any room to grow, that sort of thing. That is a manager who's not delegating. And so building the morale of the team is boosted when you start to let go, start to let people do things on their own and trust that they'll get you there, okay? Really, this is a big one. It's a big one for leaders, and the sooner you can get yourself behind it, the greater you'll be. Now, at the same time, I want to emphasize that delegating doesn't mean hand it off and walk away, right? Delegating means give the responsibility to your staff, let them figure out, make sure you're clear what the goal is, just the goal, not how to do it, right? Delegating means acknowledging that there's more than one way to do things, and more than one way to do it is acceptable, is right. That the way we would do it may be a very good way, but it's not the only way. And so letting them know what the goal is, letting them figure out how to do it, but not walking away in the sense that you stay engaged, right? You stay accountable for it. So you check in. How's it going with that? What questions do you have about that? How can I help with this, right? So supporting folks, but very much not doing it. It's all about guiding and teaching, coaching when they need it. Okay, so if you've got a pad and paper with you, or if you want to jot it in the chat, if you're comfortable with that, jot down a few thoughts to this question. What are you working on right now that could and should be delegated to someone else? You don't have to write it publicly, but jot it down for yourself. What's that one thing that right away springs to mind that could and should be delegated? And once you've had that, once you've come up with that one thing, I want you to reflect on what's holding you back from delegating. What's the barrier there? What's the why are you not letting that go to that person? When we really stop to ask ourselves, why am I not delegating this? It sometimes tells us a lot about ourselves, right? I want to be in control of this. I want to know it's done right, those sort of things. It could tell you something about your relationship with the other person. They messed up on this, this, and this, and I don't trust them. I don't know them well enough, so I don't trust them yet. I feel like I don't have the time to guide someone on this. If you can answer that second question, why am I holding back on the delegation? You'll have a good chance of getting around it. You'll be able to figure out what do I need to work on. Okay, next big topic that helps good leaders become great leaders, in my opinion, is this one. Get my little card here. Giving and receiving feedback. This is a big one again for so many people because, we're not taught how to give good feedback to people. It's not something that's in many of our school curricula. And so we end up feeling awkward and uncomfortable about it. Sometimes we hold back because we don't want to hurt people's feelings. Other times we hold back because you might be thinking, well, it's my peer, and it's not my place to tell them what's good or bad or how to do things. Sometimes we hold back because we worry we might be too opinionated on it. We might just lose our temper, lose our cool, and giving feedback to something's really frustrating us. The key here is that, again, thinking back to times, if you can, where someone has given you feedback that really helped, that really changed things, that helped you realize how you were showing up, how things were working, and what a gift it was, right? Good feedback is truly a gift. And most people, when they receive feedback that they can accept, that they can hear, they appreciate it. They see it as a gift. And so that's where the second aspect of this comes in, is receiving feedback, right? Helping people receive feedback in a way that they can hear it. And that's not done by the classic sandwich of one good, one bad, one good, but rather it's more about the language you use and how you share the information. With this one, I found that the sign, that trigger for me, that reminds me that I need to share some feedback with people is when I start to think to myself, maybe this will just go away. Maybe this will solve itself. Or maybe they'll figure this out before I have to say anything. Anytime I'm having that sort of dialogue in my head, that's a trigger to remind me that, yeah, I got to say something. I got to speak up. I got to give some feedback in a way that will help them improve their performance, their products, that sort of thing. And the key to that is helping people understand in the conversation that you're giving feedback because you know they've got it in them and you want to help them grow, right? So maybe not using the language of I want to give you a gift because they may not see it as a gift right away, but helping them understand what's motivating you, what's driving you to give them this feedback. That ideally you're not giving them feedback because you're furious or angry, you're giving them feedback because you know they've got it in them and you want to help them grow. And maybe giving feedback because I've had some experience in this area that I think might be helpful. I want to share it with you, right? That idea. It's more about how you set it up than the fact that you're actually giving some criticism around something. Equally important, of course, then, is a reminder that if you're leading people in the workplace, giving them good, positive feedback is essential as well. So that means when you notice something that's going really well or somebody that's really managing something well, even if you're thinking to yourself, well, that's their day-to-day work, of course they're good at it. Say so, say something, give people feedback when they're doing well, and it will be less awkward, less uncomfortable to then have a conversation with them when things aren't going so well. Now, as I alluded to earlier, that, and equally as important as giving feedback is receiving feedback. And particularly if you're in a leadership role, it can be hard to hear feedback. Sometimes it can be hard to get it because people are intimidated, right? They don't want to come tell you that they think this isn't working or that isn't working, or you're showing up in a way that isn't helping. And so a big part of that is letting people know you are open to feedback. So asking, your peers, your colleagues, your staff, your clients, about how things could be improved, about things that they're appreciating or not appreciating, about the way you're engaging, asking them about how you're showing up on different areas, and of course then when they tell you, just listening, just absorbing it, right? There's a quote of mine that's one of my favorites from Stephen Covey, right? He's the author who wrote the 7 Habits of pretty much the 7 Habits of everything. He's got dozens of these books out and a little too much, but one quote is that he says, most people don't listen to understand, they listen to respond. Okay, most people don't listen to understand, they listen to respond. And so when someone's giving you feedback, the key is to listen to understand, not to be thinking at all about how you're going to respond, but to be thinking about what is it they're trying to share with me? What is it that is resonating or not resonating for them that it was important for them to share with me? What can I get from this? How can I use this gift, right? And if you're leading other people and some of them are having trouble hearing feedback from you, maybe having a conversation about not only your intentions, which were to help them, but how they might listen to hear the gift in there rather than wanting to respond right away. I'm trying to keep jotting or keep glancing over here at the Q&A to make sure there's nothing coming up. Okay, so that idea of giving and receiving feedback, of having those difficult conversations is absolutely critical to move from good leadership to great leadership. And again, I think we're going to talk in a little more detail about that next week. Pardon me. The next critical skill, I guess, for being a great leader rather than just a good leader is this one: humility, or what I call vulnerability. And you may be thinking, well, the last thing I want to be is vulnerable to the people I'm leading. And, we see this time and time again where leaders try to overcompensate for their lack of experience, maybe their lack of knowledge in a particular area, maybe their own fear about something that's happening. They suppress the natural instinct, and I'll tell you, I'm saying they, but I'm saying me as well. I've been there, I've done this. Whether I was CEO of Crown Corp or I was leading a government organization of some other sort, there were times where I felt like I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know the answers to these questions. I'm scared I'm not good enough in this role. And my instinct was to overcompensate by suppressing any vulnerability and acting more confident than I actually was. I regularly got feedback in my roles as a leader that one of the things people admired was just how confident I always am, how self-assured I am. And, I'd think to myself, oh, if you only knew, right? And the thing is, if they knew, I think they would have responded better and respected me even more, because no one has all the answers. And so it's a lost opportunity, frankly, to be honest with the people around you when you need some help, when you maybe don't know the answer right away. In the subsequent years, since those roles and me becoming an executive coach and starting this company, I've come to realize how much people appreciate when a leader says, in this case, I don't know the answer, let's figure it out together. Because then people realize a couple of things. First of all, you're human, and they see you in a different way, and that sounds ridiculous, but it's true. But secondly, you start modeling the behavior. People realize they can say, I don't know, if the boss can say that, if the leader can say that, right? And so, you sort of open yourself up to greater understanding, a greater connection with the people around you, because they realize that, if you're portraying yourself as perfect, everything's fine, everything's good, I've got this, then anyone around you who's not feeling that way, which frankly is everyone, none of us feel that total sense of assuredness and confidence all the time. So everyone around you is now thinking, I'm not good enough. I'm not as good as that leader is. I can't let them see any cracks in the surface. So I've got to pretend everything's great. And that's where a culture in an organization gets built of no one helping each other, of giant mistakes being made because no one realized that this person didn't know what they were doing on that project. And so, that's a really important trait for a great leader. And being vulnerable means acknowledging when you're uncertain about things, which, we coach a lot of people from middle level leaders to senior level leaders, CEOs of companies around North America, and deputy ministers of government departments and ministries across Canada. And at some point in the coaching relationship, probably, I'm going to say 85 or 90% of those people at some point or another talk about worrying that maybe they're not qualified for this job. That's imposter syndrome. That's the feeling that maybe I got into this job by mistake. Maybe the people who hired me made a terrible mistake. Maybe I'm not good enough. Seems like my peers all have it together, and you know what, I don't. And I can't let them see that. And then in those same organizations, when people start to share with their peers and their staff that on this area, I think we need to figure it out together because I don't know. All of a sudden they start to hear from people around them how brave that was, and that they too feel that way, that there's things they need help on. It spirals, it builds a culture of openness and support rather than one of hiding vulnerabilities and acting like you've got it all together. So that's the third big skill needed to be a great leader, is humility and vulnerability. And I get it, that one's hard for a lot of people. Tied in with all this, I guess, would be the next one I would say, which is self-awareness. Okay, understanding yourself, not just, who am I, but understanding the impact that you have on people around you and understanding how they see you. And there's lots of, assessment tools out there that can help you understand it, but pardon me, it's wildly underrated, I think, as a leadership skill for leaders to know in their heart and their mind, how are others receiving them? Okay, so we talked about at the start of this of figuring out your why, of figuring out some of the things that motivate you and drive you. I'd say if you dive into that and then build on that with a little self-reflection of how does that motivation, how do those drivers, how do those things that excite you and make you happy, how do they make you show up to other people, is an excellent sort of contemplative exercise. Like I say, it's helped out a lot if you can figure out an assessment tool, or if you've ever done a 360 assessment, anything like that. But you can also just stop and think about it and ask yourself questions, because frankly, most of us, maybe you do this, but most of us, we don't take time to stop and reflect on, we'll reflect on how am I doing on this? Am I getting this right? Am I getting this project complete? Am I achieving what I need to achieve? But we don't stop and reflect on, and how am I showing up when I do that to the people around me? So it's a useful exercise, I think. And then, there's the last big thing, I think, to move from a good leader. I'm skipping over all the stuff that makes you a good leader, and the stuff that I'm talking about, the stuff that makes you a great leader. And that is, lastly, acknowledging that a leadership role is a role of serving others. And sometimes in our culture, it feels the other way around, right? Like you serve your boss and you serve your boss's boss. And then when you finally become the leader or the boss, now you get to not be serving other people. And in my view, the great leaders are the ones who flip that entirely on its head and say that the more I climb in the leadership role, the more people I need to serve, the more I need to help them achieve. Because in our view and our experience, the difference in a good leader and a great leader, or the difference in a bad leader and a good leader, even as you move up that scale, is acknowledging that leadership isn't about the leader. It's about leadership. The key leadership success factors are helping others to succeed. And by osmosis, if you will, helping the people around you succeed is going to help you succeed. So you don't have to worry about your career success. It's going to boost you. But as soon as we shift that to, I want to make myself succeed, I want to make myself look good, we start to lose all those people that we're leading. And in fact, we then start to not look good. It's counterintuitive, we fail. Whereas the more you can shift to, my leadership role is to help those people be successful, to help those people shine, to help those people achieve the things we're trying to achieve, you will be, first of all, you'll be seen as a greater leader by those folks, but you'll also be seen as a greater leader by the folks above you and the board and the clients that you're serving. So those are the key characteristics that we've sort of identified over the years as what separates a good leader from a great leader. Before I dive into then the last topic of our webinar today, which was sort of goal setting in uncertain times, I just want to let that sink in for a minute. Those are the things that set apart the great leaders from the good leaders. And by all means, if you've got questions, you can share them. Or like you say, in about 12, 13 minutes, we're going to go to a Q&A, and I'm happy to talk about any of this stuff. Okay. I've not seen any comments or questions, so let me dive into this last part about goal setting. When Leanne and I were talking, we figured goal setting in uncertain times would be a good topic because, as we started the new year, so many organizations, so many individuals were trying to think, so what are our plans for 2021? And I think most of us, the first thought was, how in the world can I figure out what my plan is when I have no idea what the world's going to be like in 2021, right? That's the reality the whole world is facing. How after a year of 2020, where all of my plans, many of my plans maybe went out the window because everything changed, how do I now plan for a year ahead? And those are very valid questions and concerns. And frankly, I want to step back a bit and say, before we dive into what goals you may or may not set as an organization, it probably will help most of us to have a bit of a shift in how we see the world, to check ourselves about how we're feeling about things before we then dive into the goal setting. Because goal setting done in a frazzled state of mind, in an uncertain state of mind, tends to be not good goal setting, right? And so one of the blogs I wrote around the new year was that maybe goal setting for 2021 has to start with goal setting around our own mindset. Maybe it has to be some goals we set for us and our organization around how we're going to approach life before we then set some goals of whether we're going to manufacture 10,000 widgets or sell this many bushels of grain or whatever it is we're doing. So, because, you know, when I look back at 2020 and the leaders we work with, we've seen some of them thrive, learn to adapt and change, and that terrible word pivot that everybody was using that just wears me down now. We've seen, you know, a lot of organizations manage to shift to work from home. We've seen other ones struggle with it. We've seen individuals sort of be resilient through this and take things as they come and then let them roll off and then move on to the next thing. We've seen others who, you know, it's each new lockdown, each new opening, and then a lockdown again, and each new hiccup in the vaccine process has caused people to just feel burdened more and more and more. And so before we dive into too much about what are my goals in 2021 as an organization or as a leader, we feel it's important to think about what are my goals as far as my mindset, my state of mind. You know, think about what does being productive even look like in a year that's got so much uncertainty. And so in that blog, we did a couple of these blogs, one earlier and then one sort of in preparation for the new year that so many people, you know, was when they set new goals. And there's just a few little tidbits. I mean, they're what worked for us, and they might not work for you, but I want to put them out there as ideas. First thing is, as someone who is a big list maker, I've always got a list of what I need to accomplish, and you know, I feel pretty good when I scratch stuff off. I feel kind of down when the end of the day comes or the end of the week comes and there's still this long list of things. So my first suggestion would be, you know, look at those weekly goals or those daily goals or whatever it is that's on your list, whether it's written down or in your head, and go through and think about every one of them is, should I do this or must I do this? Is this absolutely essential, or is it something that would be really good if I did it? And basically go through the list and remove the ones that are, oh, I should, and leave only, yes, I must. And that for those of you who are overachievers and goal-focused folks, that's going to be tough. It was brutal for me. But once I was able to start doing it, it lifted a big burden off my shoulders. Because frankly, we're in the middle of a global pandemic. If there was ever a time, it was okay to focus on the must and not the shoulds. It's now. So helping people do that. The next thing we suggest people do is figure out what the good things are. And so, you know, pull out a piece of paper. If you got one now, even you can start to do this. Think about, what are you thankful for? What are you grateful for? And, you know, it doesn't have to be something big. It doesn't have to be something profound. It could be, I'm grateful for this cup of coffee because it's really waking me up this morning. It could be, I'm grateful that kids didn't fight before going to school today. It could be something more profound, right? But coming up, and you know, frankly, I'll add in there, it could be, I gave myself permission to take the shoulds off my list. I'm grateful for having done that. I'm grateful for letting myself do that. Maybe I'm grateful for the fact that I've accepted that letting my mind rest is healthy for me and the people around me. So starting to do that, and really the folks that really do well at this try to make it a habit. So you get a journal, you get a notebook, and at the same time each day, whether that's, you know, that few moments of peace in the morning when you're up early and have your coffee before the rest of the house is up, or whether it's riding the bus, if you ride the bus to work or home, or a lot of people do it in bed. They keep the journal beside the bed, and the last thing they do before they turn out the light is write down 2 or 3 things that today you were thankful for, today you were grateful for. And it may sound hokey, I get it, I thought it was, but it builds a mindset. And if you can keep doing that for like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, every day, just 2 or 3 things, small or large, that you're grateful in the world today or in your life today or with your family or your friends or your work today, it starts to shift an attitude. And if you do it a little bit more about some of the work stuff, maybe you do one at work and one at home, it shifts the mindset then to prepare you for where do we want to be as an organization? Where do I want to be as a leader? When you can remember all the things you're grateful for. Okay, it takes us a little bit back to the start of this conversation of your why. What do you love? What motivates you? What drives you? When you start reflecting on what were you grateful about for the day, each day, for more than 2 or 3 days at a time, it starts to sink in about where the good stuff is showing up and how to capitalize on that. So, I'm not one of those touchy-feely coaches. I always say I'm very much an executive coach. I've always been one of those driven, directed kind of guys. But this changed my world, doing this, right? Starting to keep that gratitude journal and write in it each day. Another thing that's true of anything we do, but particularly as a leader, is finding an accountability partner who can keep you on track. Back in the days when people used to go to the gym, going with someone kind of helped keep you going. Well, the same thing can be true for a gratitude journal or for any leadership skills we've talked about. I'm going to delegate more or whatever, is finding an accountability partner, not someone who is that, that person you aspire to be, that person who's got it all together, but someone who's a trusted colleague or friend who's going to hold you to it, who's going to say, hey, where are you at with delegating? What sort of things did you delegate last week? And that you can be honest with, that you don't feel you have to put on a show. You can say, you know what, I was terrible at it last week. And you can talk with them about, okay, why was that? How do we get better next week? We can let that go. What are you going to do differently next week? So someone who can keep you focused. We've got some blogs on our website. If you click on the link for, accountability, or you click on the link for gratitude, there'll be lots of tips there on how you can help make this happen. And then tying that in, to the goals, as far as what you're going to do as goals for this year or the next fiscal year or whatever you're working on, is to build some of this into yourself so that you can build into the goals of the year. Gratitude journal, I think, is number one. Another thing to do is pay it forward. You hear that a lot lately. Giving people something positive to think about in their lives. And again, may sound hokey, but it makes such a difference to our mindset then when we're trying to sit down and figure out where life is going. So, that might be acknowledging someone's hard work. We said that was one of the great skills of a great leader, was to give feedback when it's positive and when it's negative. So giving people some positive feedback, expressing gratitude for something, a thank you note, a handwritten thank you note. Who gets those nowadays? Putting that positivity out there. It might mean, even buying a coffee for the person behind you in line at the Tim's, whatever. But something that you feel good about and that will make them feel good can change a mindset. Another thing is to build in some time for meditative mindfulness. And I don't mean you need to become a yogi and meditate deeply, but rather take a few moments, close your eyes if you wish, and just let yourself be. And you can do that whether you work from home, working at the office. Just sit, firmly in your chair, back against the back, close your eyes, and just let yourself be. When you notice that you're thinking about something or you're spiraling into something, Just say, okay, that's okay. I'll let that go and just be again. You know, that time, even for a few moments each day, helps clear the head before you go into big things like figuring out, so what goals are we going to set? What's realistic for this year? Two other things, just I know I'm coming up at 10 where we wanted to start the questions. So two more things. One is get moving. And I'll tell you, I'm bad at this one. I'd like to say it's because all the gyms closed that I really lost a lot of my movement. Frankly, it's just because I lost my motivation. And so what you want to do here is recognize that some sort of active movement isn't just good for, you know, the body and fitness and weight and all of that. It's good for the mind. It's good to clear the head. It's good for helping you think about the world differently. And so start small. I've started by walking the dog around the neighborhood. And an important thing to remember with this get moving and this be active thing is you don't have to be running a marathon for this to be helpful. What I said is my goal is that today I did a little bit more than yesterday. And so if yesterday was walking the dog around the block, then maybe today we did 2 blocks, or maybe we did 1.5, whatever. Maybe we came down the back lane at the end. But our goal is to improve on our own success, not to reach someone else's definition of success. Okay, that's true of everything, but particularly with this sort of physical side of things. And the last one I'm going to leave with you is sort of like the meditation, but it's really applicable to the work you're doing as a leader, as an organization, and what we call that is, let me just find it here. I've been skipping my little cards here, but we're almost actually thinking this needs to be like a hashtag in today's world, and that's take an hour. So what do I mean by that? Hashtag take an hour. The take an hour is this idea that once a week, you take an hour to think big, to dream, but in a more specific way. It's not wishful thinking. It's spending an hour uninterrupted. So wherever you can find that, and I get that's hard nowadays, but does it mean closing a door? Does it mean going for a walk and thinking? But thinking about the big ideas, thinking about your industry, where it's going, thinking about leadership, good to great. What sort of things do I want to be doing to move to great? Thinking about the bigger stuff that often what we do is we sort of set aside a 1-day leadership retreat and we go think about the big stuff. And what we're finding works so much better is if people solo take 1 hour each week, quiet, uninterrupted, and just let themselves think big thoughts. Now, as I said, it's not wishful thinking. It's not dreaming of, you know, impossible ideas. It's thinking, where can I go? What can I do with this? What would I like to do with this? And that brings back in that why that we started the conversation about, right? Part of that thinking big is, where do I bring in my why? Where am I not getting enough of that? Where does this organization need to go for its why, right? So I know I've covered a lot of things, and of course in a webinar I always feel like I am just talking at you for an hour. So I hope that's been helpful, but I wanted to bring it back to this idea of, if we're really promoting this idea of take an hour each week and reflect, contemplate, think bigger, think about your why, think about what great leaders look like, and not what other great leaders look like, but what you want it to look like for you, right? Reflect on you. And that's where then, if you've done this, you know, you're keeping a gratitude journal, you're paying it forward, you're setting your mindset to be a little more positive, and then each week you're taking the time to think big. That's where, like, the ripple effect coming out from you is going to be enormous for setting your goals for the year, because you're in the right frame of mind, from enjoying life a little more when things are so unpredictable, to helping the people around you. And yeah, maybe I'll just leave it at that. We're at 10, so I'd like to open it up to questions and start to hear where I haven't made any sense, or where you'd like me to go a bit deeper on things.
Oh, Patrick, that was fabulous. And I mean, you've provided us with some really important information that organizations can think about. And I do anticipate you've sparked a number of questions. So I'm going to get the participants to just use that question feature and or the chat and type them in there, and we will start to pose those questions to you. The first one I'm going to start off with is if there was one thing that people could focus on to become a stronger leader, and it was one thing only, what would that be?
Yeah, thanks. I think, my experience has been if you're going to focus on one thing only, it's focusing on knowing you're enough. And not by other people's definitions, because you are, but by your own definition. Focusing on reminding yourself that you are good at this, that you are here because you're good at this. Reminding yourself that you are good enough.
Excellent. Good. And I'm hoping some questions will come in on the chat panel. And while they start to, as you've worked with leaders during the pandemic, have you noticed any changes or any trends appearing?
Yeah, so I guess the biggest challenge, well, there's a few of them during the pandemic, of course, but one of them is leaders telling us, I found it hard to manage each individual. Previously, I found it hard to know what they needed from me. I found it hard to adapt my leadership to the people around me. And it's just made it so much harder when they're all working from home and we're remote and we're removed from each other. So, we spend a fair bit of time helping leaders figure out how they're going to engage more. And, when we were talking earlier about like delegating, for example, that's become even more critical in the pandemic, because leaders now, particularly if your team is working from home or some of them are at home and some of them are in the office and you alternate, you actually have to spend more time in your day meeting with people, right? Because there aren't those 2-minute run-ins in the hallway or in the lunchroom or at the water cooler that could solve things. You now have to be active in reaching out. You have to be calling and Zooming with the people on your team and checking in with them, making sure things are going well. Because, it's almost like you've got a closed door now. You're not there. They're going to feel uncomfortable coming to you, probably. And so making more time in your day is going to be essential. Otherwise, you're going to be one of these folks who's burning the candle at both ends, as so many of us are when you're working from home and, heaven forbid, working from the dining room table or something. So figuring out ways to free up more time, because you as a leader are actually going to have to be spending more time doing the leadership stuff than you did before, than you consciously did before.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I mean, engaging staff and stakeholders and board members that are part of organizations is so critical. And when people are all working from a distance and from home, that certainly does sometimes pose some challenges.
Yeah, you mentioned I was CEO of a Crown Corp at one time, and so I reported to a board, and I had a lot of staff. We had hundreds of people, and trying to achieve some really big projects at the start. And one of my biggest challenges, and I sort of realized it at the time, but more after the fact, was that I could get really distracted by the work that needed to be done, the actual work that needed to be done, and get distracted by the people who were in front of me. I'd remember to engage with my direct reports. I'd remember, I'd have no trouble engaging with people who showed up in my office to talk about things. But that meant I could easily end up forgetting or being distracted from some of the other important people in my life, which was, of course, our board. And now I'm seeing that is true with almost everyone in people's work lives, right? You're working from home, or some are working from home, and you're alternating days, or whatever the situation is in your area. It's really easy to get drawn into the work and the task that's on your computer or the email or what's in front of you, and not stay focused on building the relationship with the people you're leading and serving, You know, there's an expression I use in some of our workshops to remind people that no matter what your job title is, your job is relationship manager. No matter what title you have, you can be VP of this, VP of that, head of this, director of that, you can be frontline worker. Your job is relationship management.
I
And
love that. That's fabulous.
That's hard in the pandemic, right? Like, yeah.
Another question came in here. Do you have any suggestions on how to regain trust in an employee after a letdown?
Great question. So first of all, I would preface it with sort of the reminder, I think, because this is after a letdown, I get it, so trust was already there. Before we dive into that, I would emphasize too that some people trust instinctively, inherently, until they have reason not to trust. And other people trust once you've shown them they can trust you. There are absolute different ends of the spectrum. And so remembering that as a leader, that where you feel that, well, of course they trust me and I trust them, might not always be the case. Maybe they're one of these people who needs to have trust built up before they can trust you. Whereas in other cases, people trusted you upfront, no problem, they don't even know you, but they trust you until they can't. And so in this case, where something has happened, there's been a letdown and the employee trust has been broken, you know, it sounds cliche, but first of all, it comes back to communication. It comes back to then having that difficult conversation with the employee, even if they don't want to, even if they're not wanting to have that frank conversation that, yeah, they don't trust you anymore, they don't trust the organization anymore. And talking about, first of all, why did the letdown happen, right? What was the driver behind it? And hopefully it wasn't directed at this employee, it was something, you know, a bigger picture. That doesn't solve it, but at least they can help them understand it. And then talk about your desire to build the trust. You know, it's people assume often when trust has been broken, particularly like trust has been broken because of an organizational situation or decision that affected an employee, they assume that everyone was behind that, everyone was in line with that. And it doesn't mean you have to say, I disagreed with the decision. You shouldn't do that if it was an organizational decision. But instead, make sure the person understands that you didn't want to lose their trust. You didn't want to damage that relationship, and talk about what would be helpful. You know, saying things like, I realize you maybe don't trust the organization at all. Maybe you don't trust me at all. If we were to work on that, what would help? What sort of things could I start to do that might not gain your trust right away, but might help demonstrate that I want to regain your trust, or that the organization wants to regain your trust? The act of reaching out and saying, I want to repair this, and I'd like to hear what would be helpful to you, because what would be helpful to me might not be at all helpful to you. But engaging in that dialogue so that people start to understand, and it may take a while to sink in. They may be, you know, not sort of engaging with you as much as you'd like right away. But the more they can recognize that, oh, actually, Leanne cares about this. Leanne wants to fix this somehow, not fix the situation, but fix the relationship between us. They'll start to hear you more. But the hard part is, as the leader, you have to initiate that, because chances are the person whose trust has been broken, they're not going to be driven to come to you and say, hey, I want to rebuild trust. They're going to be just mistrustful.
Right. Thanks for sharing that. I do have another question here, and it says, I've experienced increased time and energy needed to engage my team in remote work environments. I'm mindful of the limits that my team has to take on more work. Any ideas on how to balance that with my need to delegate? I hesitate to push my team to their mental health limits, so I often take on more than I should.
Yeah, oh wow, good question. That classic caught in the middle, right? People who are your leaders are bringing more work to you, and you're trying to lead the people under you, and everybody's feeling pressured. First and foremost, absolutely, is that aspect of figuring out what's essential because, I was in government for so many years, and then I was in Crown Corporation and then in private sector. And it doesn't seem to matter what sector we're in. We live in this culture of everything's important, everything is urgent. And I don't know how as a culture we got there, but we got there. And so one of the things to do, and I don't have a graphic of this with me, but if you look up the Eisenhower matrix, it talks about this matrix of one scale is how urgent are things and one scale is how important are things. And we often conflate urgent and important, and they're very different things, right? Urgent is something that needs to be done soon so that a crisis doesn't erupt or a fire doesn't break out and it just needs to be dealt with. Important is the stuff that moves us as an organization and as a culture. And so the more you can figure out is, of all the stuff you need to delegate and all the stuff that's on your employees' plates, how much of it is in the urgent and important? How much of it is in the, urgent and not important? How much of it is in the urgent and, or not urgent and important, not urgent and not important? I should have this graphic with me, but bottom line, most leaders look at that and think, so I want to be spending my time really focused on the stuff that's urgent and important. But in fact, that's not right. What as a leader you want to be focused on is the stuff that's not urgent and is important. Because if it's urgent and important, then it's been overlooked when it was unimportant or not urgent, okay? You want to focus on the important things for sure, but you want to focus on the stuff that's not urgent, because that's the bigger, longer term picture of things. And that's where you want to spend your time and maybe delegate none of that or little of that. If things are important and they've gotten urgent, then finding someone who can take that on quickly and get it done is important from your delegating skills. If something is urgent and not important, then that absolutely needs to be delegated to one of your staff. You should not be spending your time on that. And heaven forbid, if you determine this isn't urgent and it isn't important, then no one should be working on that right now. And that's the box where most of us say, well, I can't put anything in there. Everything's important or everything's urgent or everything's both. And that's just not the case. So if you can try your best to figure out what's in that box of it's not urgent yet, and it's not important to our stakeholders, to the folks who really matter in our business, that I need to put it there. And that could be a parking list. It doesn't mean it never gets dealt with, but it becomes a parking list. And so if your staff are working on some of those things that you realize they're not particularly important, they're not urgent right now, then maybe that means saying to that staff person, I need you to put that on a parking lot for now and focus on this that's urgent right now, or focus on this thing that's becoming important or becoming urgent, while you're focused on the stuff that is really important. So stuff that, matters to your board, matters to your stakeholders, and that isn't yet urgent, so that you can be thinking about that big picture. That's what that hour a week is for, is the important and not urgent stuff. Sorry, without a graphic, that was probably confusing.
No, that sounds great. I totally followed your concept. And if you want to attach that in an email to me, I'll get that out to the participants as well. Question for you is, as an organization, we have not had a lot of leadership training. If we want to get better at supporting our leaders and future leaders, where should we start, and what tools are out there to help our leaders thrive?
Okay, big question, yeah. So that idea of helping our leaders thrive when they haven't had the training, the knowledge, the experience. I suppose it, as so many things, it comes down to budget, but on the free end of the scale, stuff that is out there, public domain, there's a lot of different sources of leadership information. I'll do it. I'm not doing this as a plug. It's free and it's there. And if it's helpful, then use it. As we do a blog every 2 weeks, and lately it's been more frequent than that during the pandemic when people are really struggling. We do a blog that's focused on leadership skills, on moving from good to great. It's It's called the coaches questions because we're coaches and we tend to end it with some thought-provoking questions for you. So my company is Padraig, Padraig.ca, and we'll send you information later. But so if you do padraig.ca/blog, you'll find it. We have like 300 back issues or something there of every topic you can think of, and we've got some things you can click on. But you can also sign up, and so then they just land in your mailbox for you. So, you know, that sort of thing, we're not the only ones who do that, and we're not necessarily the best at it. Like, by all means, sign up for ours or others. But then also looking around, to, you know, as you move up the scale, if you've got some money to help people grow in these roles, is one that, again, we've just started. I can only really speak to my knowledge of this from what we do, and I'm not trying to sell this. I don't want to plug this, but we've started running peer group programs so that are led by an executive coach. So instead of people having to invest in executive coaches, which sounds like you're spoiling yourself, and it shouldn't, but I know it does in a lot of organizations, and it's pretty expensive because it's one-on-one. We've started creating peer group programs where any individuals in an organization from anywhere in North America, but certainly in Canada, can sign up for the next cohort that opens, and they can interact. So you learn from your peers as well as learning from your coach. And in our business, in our company, we have two versions of that. One that's for leaders who haven't had that foundational learning, and that program for us alternates between coaching conversations with the whole group and workshops, day-long things. So it's got some curriculum-based learning and some coaching. We've got another one for more senior leaders where it is all coaching, where the peers and the coach are talking and coaching each other each month. So, and again, we're not the only ones. I'm not trying to pitch us, but if you can find a way that the people who need that knowledge can start to learn in like a peer atmosphere. We've been amazed as we shifted from only doing one-on-one learning and doing courses within companies where, you know, company X would hire us to come work with their leadership team, to now offering this public idea where we bring people together at similar levels. We're getting so much feedback that learning from each other has been so good, that idea of building community with other people who are leaders and who struggle with all the same things. You know, it comes back to what I was carrying on about in the webinar today of, you know, you're not the only one who's struggling. You're not the only one who doesn't know how to do this. And you don't need to know everything. That realization that people get when they get into peer groups and start to realize that all of these people who are in all of these amazing roles and all of these amazing organizations all across North America, and we all get each other because we're all scared of the same things. We're all frustrated by the same things. We all don't know how to do some of the same things. So that's a way. And, you know, there are online courses that people can take solo, but that idea of bringing your peers in, whether it's peers within your organization, help them learn from each other, facilitate a conversation where leaders get together and talk about what's challenging for them, and then explore amongst themselves how to work on that, through to a program, you know, like ours, where there's a coach leading it and or a facilitator leading it. Those are key, I think, and it's particularly the one that really excites me is that one that has a bit of a curriculum in it, because my experience, why I started this company, was no one ever teaches you how to be a leader. You know, I went on a couple leadership courses back in the day in government that were very technical. They weren't really about people skills. And there was so much assumption that because I was good as a policy writer or I was good as a project manager, that, well, now I should be promoted and now I should be good as a leader of people, right? That gap is the number one gap that organizations fail to fill. And so if you can figure out, if you can help people, whether it's free resources online, whether it's the blog, it's magazine articles, it's posts that you found on Google. Another great way that some of our clients have done it is create an in-house group. It's totally free. You know, maybe it's a lunch and learn or whatever. And nowadays we get together maybe on Zoom or Microsoft Teams. And we share an article ahead of time. So sort of like a book club, but don't call it that because some people will love that and some people will hate it. But, you know, it's your leadership learning group or whatever. And so we're going to take, you know, one of our blog posts. You're going to take something from Harvard Business Review. You're going to take something from Fortune Magazine, whatever. Something that resonated for someone in the group. Share it with everyone. And then just facilitate a conversation. What does that look like? What does it mean for us? You know, you can do that yourself. The key with that sort of thing is not to try and tell people what to do. Remind participants that the goal here is to ask questions of each other, help people explore their own thoughts around it, not to say, well, this is what you should do. Okay, and we could go into a whole topic of why that doesn't work so well, but that would be my long-winded suggestion.
No, peer-to-peer learning, mentorship programs, all the tools and strategies and suggestions you had were great. Thank you. I do have another question here. How can an organization build resiliency and mindfulness into their current practice?
Well, that one, it's helpful if it can, you know, there's so many things that shouldn't be top down, but that sort of change in culture, it's helpful if it can be top down. So if you're a leader in your organization, beginning to build that into agendas, schedules, reminders and meetings. If you have a staff meeting with, you know, the people who report to you, talk about what that looks like. If you've got experience in how to be meditative, how to bring some mindfulness, and mindfulness is bigger than meditation. Meditation is a way to help your mind settle, clear, and be aware of things around you. Mindfulness is almost the result of that. Mindfulness is being aware of how you're reacting to things, how you're responding to things, just for those who don't know the difference. And being able to shift your reaction, be aware of your reaction in real time rather than regret afterwards or whatever. And so, yeah, bringing that into an organization starts with talking about it. What does it look like? I think in many organizations, a big thing is helping people understand, why would we do this? What's the benefit? And it's another big one where you lead by example. So helping people understand how you're using it and how it might help them. I'm not sure if I've answered the question on that one, but if there's a follow-up, I'd be happy to dive in.
Okay, excellent. I want to thank Sue Clayton for putting the link to the matrix that we were discussing earlier in the chat feature. So that's great. It is there now. Any last closing comments before we wrap things up, Patrick?
No, it's been an absolute pleasure to be here. I hope folks got something out of it. We'll send out some info afterwards, and hopefully folks can join us next week. We're going to talk about a few other topics.
Right on. Patrick, that was exceptional. I believe that you have inspired a number of organizations to consider alternatives and new approaches to develop their leadership skills and to become great leaders. So thank you so much for being with us today. I do appreciate the time that you've shared with us. I am just going to share my screen again here. I'm guessing that you folks can see my screen. Is that correct?
Leanne, just go up to the sharing and click show your screen.
Excellent. Thanks so much for the technical support, Lori. Is that working for you now?
Yep.
Excellent. So yes, it was fabulous. Really appreciated you spending the time with us today. And in closing, I would like to thank everyone for joining us, for spending the time with us this morning to come to this Learn and Lead seminar hosted by Manitoba Agriculture and Resource Development. As Patrick mentioned, I would encourage you to all please join us again on March 10th. Patrick's second session will happen, and it's called Leading Others. And on March 10th, he will cover adapting your leadership approaches to those you lead, building your communication and relationship skills, leading remote teams to succeed, and having those difficult conversations with staff, peers, and directors. we just feel like on March 10th, we're going to take it that next step. So thank you. And please register for that session. If you are looking for other governance or leadership information, please visit our website at gov.mb.ca/agriculture and click on Industry Leadership. Our team is available to assist and respond to your governance and leadership questions, so you can contact us at leadership@gov.mb.ca. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful day, and we'll hope to see you all back here on March 10th. Take care.